Davis administration faced an uphill battle in 2022, but by the end of the year, Bahamians were looking back on a landscape where their normal flow of life and their optimism had been restored.
Mr. Davis is going to do good for the country because he means good for the people. And he changed. He still hang over the hill with the people. He still go to the local sport bar. He still go to church.
That he have to correct a lot of things that the previous government did. And I think he's on the right track.
Excellent, excellent. Keep it up.
The Davis administration breathed new life into an economy suffocated by the COVID-19 pandemic with healthy numbers for 2022 and beyond.
I am pleased to report that based on current projections, we anticipate revenue collections for the full fiscal year to total $2,455.1 million. This equates to $208.6 million above the revenue targets established in 2020.
To God be the glory.
Great things He has done.
Homes at last. Filling a need and fulfilling a commitment of its blueprint for change, the government started hammering away at its goal to make affordable housing an option once again.
As Minister of Transport and Housing, I'm grateful for our partnership with local contractors and other developers to make affordable housing a reality for Bahamians.
Bahamians began heading back to work in greater numbers in 2022, and the country's coffers were quenched as tourism returned in convincing fashion.
Not only have we returned in terms of numbers of visitors, but the room rates are also up.
The Prime Minister told industrialized countries that their carbon emissions are costing the Bahamas and the region, and that it's past time to come up with a win-win strategy.
So we need to work together to transition the world to clean energy. Let's get real about what's coming. Let's get real about what we need to do next.
The Davis administration brought COVID exhaustion to an end.
We introduced free testing, something the previous government said couldn't be done. Distributed almost 1 million free medical grade masks.
I'm Keishla Adderley. Up Close 2022, a year of transition, starts now. A multi-layered strategy was required to restore fiscal stability and public faith in 2022.
A health crisis, an education crisis, and an economic crisis. We got right to work.
A fledgling Davis administration doubled down on all of it. The way forward budget focused on countering inflation due to global shocks, expanding opportunities for Bahamians, and growing the economy. The Prime Minister's communication to Parliament revealing progress on a major economic benchmark, a sobering debt-to-GDP ratio.
The government's debt ratio was 101% of GDP, June 2021. I'll say that again. At the end of June 2021, debt was at 101% of GDP. And now we are at 87.5%. I am pleased to report that based on current projections, we anticipate revenue collections for the full fiscal year to total $2,455.1 million. This equates to $208.6 million above the revenue targets established in 2020.
Revenue collections increased by more than $700 million in the 2021-2022 fiscal year when compared to the previous fiscal year. The revenue increase of $2.6 billion represents an increase of $364.1 million over the original revenue forecast for the fiscal year ending June 30th and $269.8 million over the revised budget target. This improvement in spite of the reduction in value-added tax from 12% to 10% on January 1st, 2022. And as economic performance improved, the government focused on the finances of long-suffering public servants, delivering on overdue payments and increasing minimum wage.
Compensation of employees increased by $24.4 million to $538.3 million, largely owing to the resumption of promotions, staff reclassifications, payment of increments, and other employee costs which were delayed for years. At this time, we also like to announce the full reinstatement and payment of all outstanding increments. Madam Speaker, we also believe that the rate of minimum wage needs to increase because of the general erosion of spending power of ordinary Bahamians. An imperative which has been made more urgent by the current level of inflation. To this end, we have submitted a proposal to the PSU to increase minimum wage in the public sector with incremental increases starting in July.
The increase saw the country's minimum wage go from $210 to $260 per week for public servants, with plans to implement the same in the private sector in January 2023. As joblessness remained a reality for some and others struggled to recover, the government also stepped in with social assistance relief for the most vulnerable and lowered food costs.
We have made a permanent increase in social assistance by 50% in comparison to the pre-pandemic levels. This increased assistance is to be disbursed through the reintroduction of a conditional cash transfer program, which was commonly referred to as the RISE program. The most direct tool we have to affect the cost is by reducing import duties and monitoring price controls. In the past year, we have therefore reduced import duties on dozens of food items, including healthy options like fruits and vegetables. We have lifted the import ban on Canadian beef, which will lower the cost of meat to consumers. We have expanded the list of food items on the price control list and have also hired new price control inspectors to ensure compliance with price regulation requirements. These are measures which bring some immediate relief.
Still ahead, giving Hurricane Dorian victims their due and taking tourism to the next level. It's an image that may have been taken for granted. A bustling Bay Street teeming with visitors and valuable tourist spend, much of it flowing from a new cruise port undergoing a major facelift. Following some lean months due to global travel restrictions, Tourism Minister Chester Cooper spent 2022 making it better in the Bahamas once again for visitors and Bahamians. By the third quarter of 2022, the report was glowing, rivaling pre-pandemic numbers.
We are this year rivaling the pre-pandemic numbers of 2019 with our destination welcoming 3.6 million visitors. By half year alone, that number represents 515% increase over the same period last year. And if we look at total stopovers, that's about 1 million by mid-year compared to 500,000 the year before. There is no doubt we're open for business.
The Lyndon Pinley International Airport currently sees around 11,000 visitors each day, but tourism forecasters prepared for exponential increases as airlift, suspended during the pandemic, returned.
And we're getting more and more rooms back into our inventory. We're attracting substantial airlift. We have 12 direct flights out of London. We have flights coming from Raleigh, Durham, that's new, Bahamas Air. We have Sunwing coming soon from Canada to Grand Bahama. We have American Airlines, and someone said that's their favorite airline in the Caribbean. They're starting up soon from Charlotte to Grand Bahama. We have Frontier offering even more flights, and Air Canada coming back to Georgetown, Exuma very soon.
San Salvador's anchor property was back in 2022. Club Med underwent a $5 million upgrade, and a $3.5 million investment in infrastructural repairs was undertaken on the island, with improvements to water and electrical systems and continued work on the airport. 250 Bahamians returned to work there, as Club Med Senior Vice President of Development and General Counsel Eileen Kett explains.
The investment in the airport will allow Club Med to bring in weekly charter flights from Europe, Canada, and the United States on Bahamas Air. And we expect to bring over 15,000 international clients to the island each year. And we expect over 70% of the Bahamians who worked at Club Med prior to the closure to come back to San Salvador and work for Club Med again.
Club Med investment in San Salvador is north of $100 million to date. And the operating and their monthly expenses, I think, exceeds more than $15 million a month. And so you can see the economic impact that the opening of Club Med will have on our island. It specifically helps our island, but more generally, it helps the whole Bahamas.
San Salvador wasn't the only island enjoying a tourism revival, touting approved investments of more than $1.2 billion for Exuma alone since coming to office. Tourism and Investments Minister Chester Cooper announced developments, including one on an Exuma Key worth $150 million, which includes a resort, marina, airport, and golf course, and another worth $11 million for the development of a high-end, environmentally sustainable private island boutique resort on Little Fowl Key. Long Island is also preparing to host its largest anchor business yet. The government signed a heads of agreement in 2022 with Azul Destinations Limited and Calypso Cove Destinations for the development of Calypso Cove, a luxury cruise port terminal, marina, and a 200-room hotel set in Gordon's and Mortimer's South Long Island, worth $100 million. Here in the capital, new hotel development also saw the Wynn Group prepare for the opening of its luxury property near Goodman's Bay. The new Goldwyn Resort and Residences is set to open February 2023. Yet another boost of confidence, Prime Minister Philip Davis says, is being exhibited countrywide.
It's the confidence that the developer has in the Bahamas, and the fact and the confidence that he has that this will work. It will all go well for our economy, because I'm advised that they will be hiring at least 200 or plus workers here on the property. They're about to start another phase of this next door, which is another boon for the economy. And for that, I just would like to thank the investors and the developer for their continuing confidence in this country.
Tourism officials ended the year forecasting 2023 to be the best year ever for tourism. In 2019, the country marked a record number of stopover visitors, and it's projected that 2023 numbers will surpass those. The government also shored up tourism offices abroad and went further to woo wealthy investors taking to the Far East. The government established diplomatic relations and signed a memorandum of understanding with Saudi Arabia. It's expected to yield a broad spectrum of opportunities.
We've signed a memorandum of understanding to cooperate on tourism and investment matters, to cooperate with our Tourism Development Fund and our Tourism Development Corporation. We will be hearing soon about some of the tangible steps being taken as a result of this Memorandum of Understanding, but this is a two-way relationship. We've been long established in the tourism business. There are some things we can do to help Saudi Arabia as they open their country to tourism, and there's some things that they can do to help us.
Meantime, Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries and Local Government, the Honourable Clay Sweeting, is growing a food security force with grants for farmers and the scientists of the food production movement the Davis administration is vigorously pushing.
We have already accelerated investments in the agriculture sector to improve food security and reduce our reliance on imports, a point that the Minister of Agriculture will further expand during.
This pilot program is not only necessary, but timely. We look forward to presenting more details on this incentive in the very near future. We will continue to partner with the Small Business Development Center to ensure that this benefits as many Bahamians as possible.
So what our product does, it measures and collects data for soil saturation, soil nutrition, atmospheric conditions, and then it uses this data to run automated processes using AI to help growers save. And so through this program, we're actually now receiving the funding that we desperately need to be able to expand and to be able to offer this to others. So we thank you very much, Minister, for this opportunity, because this is very, very timely.
My name is Shomi Khan Cargo. I am myself and my team at Well Mother Fungus. We grow organic mushrooms, fully containerized, where we monitor very carefully temperature, CO2 levels, humidity levels, lighting levels, in order to produce mushrooms year-round despite the weather conditions. Through this round of funding, again, which is very, very, very timely, we intend to solarize our production, reduce our carbon footprint, as well as reduce our cost of production to bring down our price to make these healthy products more available to the general population.
Hi, my name is Lance Pinder. I'm from Abaco Big Bird Poultry Farm. We've been in business for 27 years. One of the biggest expenses for doing poultry production, not really the growing of the birds, but the processing of the birds, is the processing facilities are very energy intensive. So we intend to use this funding to help with solar, to cut down our energy costs, which would reduce prices. And also for our company, at this time, we're still rebuilding from the storm and the impacts of COVID. So it's going to free up cash flow that will help us.
Getting back to school after enduring what proved an often cumbersome virtual learning process, students returned to the classroom in 2022. The government implemented a learning loss recovery task force to help students who fell behind, hired 200 new teachers to fill vacancies, and carried out repairs to school buildings to the tune of $15 million. Calming industrial tension was a major focus of the Davis administration in 2022 as well. The Teachers and Educators Managerial Union, Bahamas Union of Teachers, and Airport, Airline, and Allied Workers Unions among those signing agreements.
We have gotten increases in housing allowance and responsibility allowance.
To demonstrate the respect, the regard, and the placement of teachers in our national development. And I trust that this marks the beginning of cordial and productive relations between the Bahamas Union of Teachers and the Ministry of Education as we move forward with our singular interest, which is advancing the cause of education in this country.
It's a matter of concluding it and signing a new agreement. And then National Flight Services, over the last 2 years during COVID, we sustained some challenges like everyone else in the country. And we just wanted to primarily ensure the employees that the company will be fair and honest in our union negotiations to ensure that they can live amicably in these challenging economic times.
Agreements were also finalized with the Bridge Authority and Bahamas Communications and Public Officers Union. Nurses also finalized a deal which includes a retention bonus of $3,000 after every 3 years of service, an allowance for uniforms, a pandemic and disaster benefit, an increase in base salary, and insurance, which includes a death benefit while serving in the line of duty of $100,000. The government also boosted the efficiency of the health system, approving the hiring of 500 allied health professionals.
To God be the glory.
Great things He has done.
The goal of affordable home ownership was back on the table in 2022. Keys were presented to 40 families in the Pinecrest subdivision. The government partnership with Arawak Homes is nearing completion of Phase 1, with 47% of recipients employed with the public service or a quasi-government agency.
Together, we are working for the maximum benefit of the Bahamian people. I'm also happy to report that this distribution of keys marks the point where Phase 1 of the Pinecrest development is more than 85% complete. That Bahamians must be afforded the kinds of opportunities for happy, prosperous lives and foster a heightened sense of national esteem.
Among today's recipients are Bahamians employed in the fields of education, law enforcement, healthcare, and the private sector. Considering the personal sacrifices made healthcare professionals in the fight against the COVID pandemic, I'm delighted to see that we have some nurses also receiving keys to their homes. As Minister of Transport and Housing, I'm grateful for our partnership with local contractors and other developers to make affordable housing a reality for Bahamians.
The government is also finalizing its rent-to-own program, while housing developments are also underway in Abaco and Eleuthera. It's been a long road for many in Grand Bahama and Abaco since Hurricane Dorian shattered life as they knew it back in 2019. In 2022, national memorials were held and monuments honoring the dead were erected, marking the first nationally recognized acknowledgement of the country's loss.
Leaf Lane is bittersweet. We try to mourn in private, so at some point, you have to come out and go through the routine again. But I was happy that the victims of Dorian are being honored.
The government also amended the law, finally freeing the beneficiaries of Dorian victims from a lengthy 7-year waiting period to have the missing declared dead and allowing them to receive benefits.
As we remember, we are also mindful of the need to act, and there is still much to do. We have changed the law, as you would have heard, in relation to the presumption of death to facilitate quicker settlement of insurance, banking, and other commercial claims. We have completed the technical phase of the new Abaco Hurricane Shelter. We have helped people begin to move out of the dooms to cleaner, safer homes. It has not been easy or perfect, but it is an important step in moving forward.
I've never seen something like this happen. I've never seen it, not in the Bahamas. I've never seen it. If it has, I'm not aware of it. But the confidence level that I have in this administration, I mean, it's on an all-time high. I went to lawyers upon lawyers, and they're saying, that's law. That's law. There's nothing that I can do.
When we return, Prime Minister Davis takes his campaign against climate change to the world.
Let me submit, Black-governed countries also matter. Let me submit, Black-governed countries also matter.
Confronting the world's most powerful nations about one of the biggest threats to our survival paid off big time as Prime Minister Davis engaged with world leaders and financiers in 2022. The Prime Minister told industrialized countries that their carbon emissions are costing the Bahamas and the region, and that it's past time to come up with a win-win strategy.
I'm not here to ask any of you to love the people of my country with the same passion as I do, or even to act on behalf of future generations in your own country. I'm asking, what is it worth to you to prevent millions of climate refugees from turning into tens of millions, and then hundreds of millions, putting pressure on borders and security and political systems across the world? I'm not here to tell the private sector to give up caring about profits. I'm here to say that in a world of profound instability, your profits are very much in danger. So we need to work together to transition the world to clean energy. Let's get real about what's coming. Let's get real about what we need to do next.
Prime Minister Philip Davis doubling down on the critical issue of climate change all year long. Addressing several fora on the issue, the Prime Minister detailed the Bahamas' move to be the first to market carbon credit sales.
I've set legislation to engage Article 6 of the Paris Accord to help the private sector engage in the voluntary markets, carbon market, by offsetting through purchasing carbon credits. We are now in the process of having our carbon asset verified.
That was one facet of the plan. Also key in the fight, recouping the millions of dollars in losses year over year due to hurricane damage and the burdensome loans tied to those losses. In September, Prime Minister Davis invited the region to the Bahamas in the first Caribbean Regional Heads of Government meeting, the brainchild of the Davis administration put on to enable the region to go to COP27 with a united position. Prime Minister Davis and Bayesian President Mia Mottley on two key proposals coming out of those talks.
For example, if there was one project and one project alone, that the Caribbean Development Bank, working in collaboration with the international financial institutions and the G20 countries, could help spark a program for transforming all public transport vehicles into renewable energy, alternative energy, powering those vehicles in a way that makes them fossil fuel friendly, not relying on fossil fuels alone. And secondly, that we also deal with the funding necessary for us to better address the drought that many of our countries are facing.
For one thing, you would have heard talk about loss and damage, which is something that the developed world keep kicking down the road. But we want to ensure that focused attention is paid on it and some solution come out of COP27 on that issue. And another example is that Prime Minister Mottley spoke about future compensations and that a fund should be set up. And what is the mechanism for that fund? Conversations been had in the sessions that 2% on oil export should be put into a fund. Those are some of the issues that we may be putting forward. And as I said, my cautious optimism is because of the developed world continually kicking down the road. And very often they latch on to some excuse to justify kicking the can.
Those delays were compounded by the burden of loans, the only way countries like the Bahamas would be able to recover from devastating storms. GDP benchmarks kept the Bahamas out of the most favorable funding arrangements. But direct talks with the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Christina Georgieva, on the sidelines of COP27 changed that and set the tone for the Bahamas to benefit from a new asset class, carbon credits.
We have a meeting of minds and meeting of hearts. The world is falling short of commitments made to those countries that are most affected by the climate crisis. We have to find a way to unleash more financing for the Bahamas and all the countries like the Bahamas. Carbon offsets, carbon credits can be an asset class for the Bahamas that helps to finance adaptation to climate shocks.
I'm very appreciative of the sensitivity that the IMF is showing to the challenges that small and developing states like ours have, particularly with this existential threat that's upon us. And I'm grateful that she is going to look into how assist us in the monetization of our carbon credits as a new asset class. And I'm so delighted that we're able to have this meeting this afternoon to share our views, concerns, and the way forward on these things. The one thing that comes out of this meeting, neither of us are going to give up. Our conversation covered debt sustainability, and she has offered to look into how they factor in lost debt incurred by consequence of climate change in the debt profile and how that impacts our debt sustainability.
We have made one step in that direction by creating first ever long-term concessional financing capacity at the IMF, exactly to support countries that are vulnerable to climate shocks. We currently have $40 billion available to our members for 20 years, maturity 10.5 years, grace period, and it is available not just to low-income countries, it is available to vulnerable middle-income countries like the Bahamas. Everybody who follows up this topic knows that vulnerability to climate shocks has not been accepted as criteria for concessionality until now.
Meantime, the fight continues for some semblance of equality in the financial services space. The United Nations heard Prime Minister Davis declare unreservedly what he sees as the problem.
We find it astounding that the $2 to $3 trillion, which is estimated to be laundered each year through the developed countries, are never flagged as causes for concern. And yet my country, which is widely recognized as one of the best regulated countries in the world, and other countries like the Bahamas, are singled out for such reputational attacks. The evidence is mounting that the considerations behind these decisions have less to do with compliance and more to do with darker issues of prejudged discriminatory perceptions.
2022 ended with some important new additions. The armed forces expanded with new police and defense force recruits, prison guards, and customs and immigration officers. The new Andre Rogers Baseball Stadium was officially opened, and as the mask mandate finally ended, it was a new beginning for regattas, festivals, and Junkanoo after a 2-year hiatus. A new year will bring new possibilities and new challenges as always, but this year will mark a major milestone, the Bahamas' golden anniversary of independence. Hundreds hit the road in 2022 to mark the countdown, a symbolic march forward, upward, and onward together. For Prime Minister Philip Davis, it's an important benchmark.
This event just reminds us that a healthy people makes a healthy nation. And we trust that this will be the catalyst for us going into the next year in our wellness program.
This has been OPM Press Now, the Year in Review. Thanks for joining us.